Hey everyone, it's David, your favorite Geek Garage podcast host. Actually, I'm kind of the only host. Anyways, thank you for being a listener of the Geek Garage podcast. We really do appreciate it. If you'd like to support the show, there are a couple ways to do so. One is to simply subscribe to the podcast. That's one great way to help. Another is to leave us a rating and review wherever you get your podcast, whether that be Google Play, Stitcher, iTunes, any other place that you find your podcast. Leaving us a rating and review really helps us out, and we do appreciate it if you do that. The third way to help us out is to visit our merch store, which you can find on our website, or you can go to geekgaragepodcast.threadless.com. And you can buy some of our merch. We got cool t-shirts and tank tops and all kinds of stuff there that you can buy with our logo on it. So yeah, our episode today was great. We had Shauna Hoyt on, who is one of my good friends and a horror movie enthusiast. To say she's obsessed with horror movies is putting it lightly. But yeah, we had a great time talking about just kind of horror movies in general. We talked about, some subgenres within horror. We talked about the use of special effects versus practical effects. And we talked about, some of our favorite movies. We talked about It, which, has been, the latest craze in horror. And then we talked about some movies that could maybe not be represented in the horror genre, but definitely have horror elements to them, kind of like Requiem for a Dream and stuff like that. So yeah, we really hope that you like this episode, and go! Welcome. Don't forget to get kind of close to your microphone.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Welcome to the Geek Garage podcast, episode number 16. We are going to be talking about horror movies today. I didn't forget. I was just, that was my dramatic, suspenseful pause. And it just came off as a joke rather than actually suspenseful. So that's cool. But with me today is actually one of my favorite guests, and we haven't even done the friggin' podcast yet because she knows much more about horror movies than I could ever possibly hope to know about horror movies. It's Shauna Hoyt. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am excellent. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
This is like the most exciting thing
It's a dream
ever.
come true, right? It's such a dream come
For
true.
sure.
Like you've always wanted to be on some rando's podcast.
Absolutely.
Some dude that you just met like a month ago.
Exactly.
And was like, "What, you like horror movies? Let's do a podcast."
Absolutely. That's my favorite.
Yeah. Cool. Well, to let you guys know ahead of time, we're not going to have a whole lot of structure to this episode. It's just going to be kind of like flying by the seat of our pants. We have a couple topics that we want to touch on, but it's just going to be kind of like a freewheeling discussion of the couple points we want to touch on. So just to let you listeners know ahead of time that there might be some instances where we kind of go off the cuff. So yeah,
we can talk for hours.
Yeah,
we could talk for days.
Yeah, it could happen, but my computer just popped up a message that was like, "Hey David, you only have like 19 gigs left on your computer, so you might want to consider deleting some stuff off your hard drive." And I'm like, I know, I don't have anything to get rid of.
It's all important.
Yeah, it really is, which is kind of ridiculous, but whatever. All right, so we are going to kind of start off by doing something kind of interesting, so our listeners have an idea of your credentials, Shauna, just so they know that I didn't pick up some random person and be like, "Hey, you want to talk about horror movies?" I mean, no pressure, but just so they have an idea of your background with horror movies, and because you have definitely an interesting background, but one that's probably not too different from a lot of people that are into horror. So, yeah, you want to tell us a little bit about how you got into horror movies?
Yeah, for sure. So, I am definitely, I guess you could call me obsessed with horror,
I would
horror
say
and
that,
sci-fi.
but that's cool.
I'm not, my background is this. When I was about, oh man, I want to say like 3 or 4. I mean, definitely way too young to be watching the things I was watching. I started watching horror movies. It might have started off, with like sci-fi and then kind of morphed into something more. But my dad has been a horror movie fan since he was little, and he grew up watching like the Twilight Zone and stuff like that, which
Right.
is actually still terrifying if you really think about it.
Yeah.
So I grew up watching those things, and then it sort of turned into any and all scary movies and sci-fi movies. And my mom is more of a traditional gal and
Right.
didn't necessarily appreciate my growing fascination with this type of television. And so she would get really upset, and she would tell my dad she's going to have nightmares. She's going to end up like this crazy weirdo person when she gets older. I mean, maybe I did a little bit, but I think like Dave, you and I talked about before,
Right.
horror movies can sometimes ground you as well.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I have a rounded I had a well-rounded childhood, but I'm a dreamer. I dream, literally a dreamer. I dream.
You may say
every
I'm a
night.
dreamer, but I'm not the only one.
No. So I literally dream every night, and sometimes I have nightmares, but not. I wouldn't say that they're heavily influenced by anything that I'm watching.
Do you ever have a score to your nightmare, like background music?
I don't. Now that you mention that, I don't think so. I can't remember.
I don't know if that's an accurate way to put the ones that I've had, but like I don't have nightmares very often, but when I do, they're pretty nuts, and I can never really remember what they were about, but I just remember them being very terrifying as while they were happening. But I feel like looking back on those particular nightmares, the ones that stick out, of having like this like dun 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 like that cheesy music you'd hear, and kind of like the Phantom of the Opera, like
Yes,
dun, dun,
yeah.
dun, dun.
Yeah.
Shit like that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that was just a random question that popped up in my head.
You know what's funny about that is when you talk about like the kind of music that you hear with horror movies.
Right.
My one of the things my dad used to say to me when I was little is, if it ever gets too scary, look, we can just mute the TV. And we would mute it, and we'd be watching it, and it's like, wow, this is like not even nearly as scary as it was before. So I think you don't even notice the score unless you're really thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's amazing how the noises that you hear and the music that they're playing and the sound effects that are going on can really impact
Right.
the scariness of that particular movie.
Yeah, the score definitely has a huge impact, in my opinion, and obviously yours, with horror movies. They kind of, as I was rewatching Nightmare on Elm Street last night, I was, what's his name? Whoever directed it, Wes Craven. That silly ass synth music. That's as they're like running away, and they're doing that silly ass like run, like they're like, I hope he doesn't catch up to me. Like just like half-assed run, kind of like what I do on the treadmill.
Yeah,
I'm like, well, I really don't feel like putting much effort into this, so I'm gonna do bare minimum.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and then there's the synth track, like
Yep.
like dee 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 dee.
So 80s.
Yeah, it's very dated. But that's why we love those movies.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, my history of horror movies is a little different. I actually didn't really start watching horror until I was maybe in middle school or high school. Like, I think Scream was maybe one of the first quote unquote horror movies that I saw. I know earlier when we were doing our pre show notes, we were talking about how Scream doesn't even really belong in the horror movie
I
because
mean, it's definitely more of a comedy, but
really, like, I mean, you could gather up a bunch of people with, with a giant bowl of popcorn and just laugh your ass off
oh,
at this
totally.
movie.
Yeah.
Especially when Drew Barrymore gets stabbed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or when Nev Campbell does anything,
right.
like says anything, does anything.
Yeah, it's almost to the point of like, what's funnier, like Scream or Scary Movie? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
Right.
like which one's
The
funnier?
parody or the actual
Right.
horror movie.
Yeah. But yeah, I like I said, I growing up, I was way more into like sci-fi stuff. Like I watched E.T. on repeat. Like I had that and Who Framed Roger Rabbit on VHS when I was like 5, and I swear to God, we didn't like I had friends growing up. I don't want to, I don't want to brag or anything. But I did spend a lot of time in front of the TV, like playing video games and watching TV. But we had a very minute selection of movies, and I had like these two, so I would watch ET a lot, and so that kind of sparked my interest for more sci-fi movies. So I'd watch like I watched the X-Files a lot growing up.
Yeah.
Just other sci-fi TV and movies. So I was kind of introduced to horror at, I don't depending on who you talk to, an appropriate age. I guess when my brain could handle it.
Which is age 3.
Yes.
It's been proven
Yeah.
scientifically. Yeah.
I mean, particularly my brain. I don't know if I'd be subject to nightmares if I watched them too early.
Right.
But yeah, like I said, I remember like seeing Scream when I was in like junior high, and then I started. I think one of the first old school movies, old school horror I saw was like The Exorcist. I remember being pretty freaked out with watching that, but like the good freaked out where you're like, ooh, this is like freaky and awesome.
Absolutely.
So yeah, and then it just kind of like snowballed from there into like wanting to check out like more subgenres, which is coincidentally and something else we'll get into a little bit later on. So yeah, let's so we one of the overarching themes that we're going to be doing today is kind of doing some compare and contrast to the old school versus new school. I thought we could talk about maybe some of like the special effects that they used to do in the classics versus what they do now, or like we'd say from like the late 90s up until recently, which we've seen kind of a resurgence of more practical effects and less depending on CGI.
Right.
But yeah, so what do you think about the fact that they had to rely so heavily on practical effects, like back in the day? Like for instance, like when I was watching Nightmare on Elm Street last night, it reminded me about the scene where the very first girl that gets killed, the blonde, and she's basically being dragged like on the ceiling and stuff.
Yeah.
And the whole time I was thinking like, I mean, it's silly, but at the same time, it's also like, I'm like, how did they film that? Like, I want to know how they did that. And I just think it's so interesting that, those movies were filmed at such a time where they didn't have special effects.
Right.
So they had to rely on being able to pull that kind of shit off.
Yeah. Or people that can really do that.
Yeah. I mean,
dragged across the ceiling.
Yeah, I don't know if I could do that. I mean, I don't have the jumping abilities.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, what do you think about? I mean, do you kind of prefer like more practical effects over like CGI, or do you kind of like a combination of both?
I'm a practical old school kind of
Yeah.
girl. I like the old making noise with your with like like a drum and a
Yeah.
and a pile of rocks or something. I mean, I like the effects that Psycho has in it. I like the effects that the birds have. Now that's going way old school. But even like you were talking about with the Nightmare on Elm Street is just it's cheesy and you think and they obviously they're not using they couldn't use the computer at all.
Right.
It really until later on, although there are Nightmare on Elm Street episodes later on that do. But
Maybe that's why they all tanked.
yeah, I know it just went bad. It got bad.
Yeah.
But I appreciate. I think it's there's something to say about something beautiful and simple about that particular aspect of the craft. Like I'm making these effects, and I don't have to rely on technology,
Right.
to what we see now in some of the more contemporary films, where you don't even need actors.
Yeah.
Now, really, you can just make them on your computer, and then they can just be very scary on film. And for me, that just isn't horror. In the traditional sense. So I'm definitely old school.
Yeah. I feel you. I do. I do recognize that it's a lot of the times it's hit or miss with the practical effects.
Right.
Like sometimes, like a lot of them, like that scene, it really holds up. The scene where Johnny Depp gets sucked into the bed, and I know we're kind of focusing on this particular movie, and there's like a million movies with great practical effects, and then a million movies with very obviously dated practical effects.
Right.
But yeah, there was a point that I was just gonna make. Flickering lights.
The ghosts are here.
Oh yeah. Did you know that in The Exorcist, they used two different actresses for Reagan?
For Reagan as Reagan and Reagan as Demon Reagan?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah,
I did hear that.
When I was doing research for this episode, I did not realize that until when I was doing research. That apparently the actress that they used, she, in order to get that rough growly voice, the "fuck me, Jesus,"
Yeah.
that voice, they. I don't think they forced this on her, but I wouldn't put it past them that they forced her to do this, or not forced, but said like, hey, we'd like you to smoke 5 packs of cigarettes a day and drink lots of whiskey to achieve this demon voice.
Yeah.
But that's basically what she did. But she was a recovering alcoholic.
Wow.
So,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So she had a priest on set, which was kind of like her personal priest, I think, to kind of help counsel her because she was having to kind of put herself back through remission to achieve these effects.
Wow.
And that's not like the only messed up thing about The Exorcist.
Right.
Like I've heard they actually had to perform exorcisms on set because they thought the set was haunted.
Wow.
And I think there's all different kinds of other trivia about that particular movie. But yeah, like the infamous like spider walk like
Yes.
down the stairs, that scene sticks out in my mind as one of those like freaky moments from like seeing it when I was younger, and I was like, ugh! Like gave me the heebie-jeebies.
Yeah.
But yeah,
And even the more, and I agree with you, and even the more contemporary versions of the classic Exorcist movie, like Exorcism of Emily Rose,
Right.
and I mean, there are so many now.
yeah, there's a lot of exorcism movies.
There is a lot of exorcism going on out there.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is that the more contemporary ones, even though they do duplicate the like the contortion of the body and that type of thing, they just do not have the same effect that the original exorcism had.
Right.
And that's sometimes where I find myself getting snobby is when
Sure.
I'm comparing some of the newer things with some of the older stuff, and I think like, oh, but it was done so amazingly perfect during the exorcism that nobody can touch that, even with all the progress that special effects have made over the years.
Right.
I just feel like they're you just can't they just can't compare.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, that's a good one. That backwards spider walk is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I think too, the dedication of the actors and the directors to pull some of that stuff off was just blows my mind
Yeah.
sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
It was like everyone was just feeling it, and you do hear a lot too about sets being haunted and movies being haunted and actors being haunted. And there's quite a bit of there are quite a bit of rumors circulating around poltergeist as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. There. I can't remember particularly what I read about Poltergeist. Did I think someone actually died from that movie?
yeah, somebody definitely died, and I can't remember who it was, but was it the little girl? Because I think the original was Heather O'Rourke, but I'm not sure. But oh gosh, now I'm just saying that she died, and I don't know that she did. But
She's gonna listen to this podcast
quote me.
and she's gonna email me and be like, "You said I was dead."
I'm sorry if you're not dead, but I thought maybe it was her. But there definitely, there definitely was something, and the actors feel it too, and I
Right.
think that that's really interesting when the actors feel like, wow, this is so intense, the material is so intense, and the subject matter is so intense that the set could be haunted,
Yeah.
or we could be haunted, and all these bad things can happen to us, and I think it's really interesting when that happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not happened to us, so screw 'em.
Exactly.
Let's talk about some since we kind of talked about some awesome practical effects. Let's try and think of some great instances of where special effects were done really well. One thing that tends to stick out in my mind, and it's probably just because I saw the Conjuring movies recently for the first time, particularly the second one. I don't know if it was a mix between special and practical effects for the nun, the demon nun, whatever the fuck that was.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Scared the shit out of me. Like I know Lindsay was teasing me earlier about watching movies at work, but I saw this at work during a slow day, and I was like sitting in my seat, and I was like. Just like so terrified.
Please let the lights not go out right now.
Right.
Like that kind of thing.
But yeah, like the like I said, I don't know if it was a mixture between practical effects, like if that was an actual person in costume and they just kind of, beefed it up a little bit in post-production. But talk about like effective elements of psychological and physical terror.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like the one particular scene that jumps out to me is like when she's kind of first introduced, where the dude's wife. I mean, she's kind of the one that deals with the nun,
Right.
and she like when she pops out of the mirror.
Yes.
That was pretty crazy. And then at the climax of the movie when I might be wrong, but it's like she's shoving her out the window or something like that, or or she's getting like pushed out the window, and she has the potential.
It's the little girl and the husband are up there, and the nun is up there as well.
Yeah.
And then the wife comes up, and she has to confront her.
Yeah.
She has to confront the nun. Yeah. This demon from her, really her visions and her dreams, and someone that she's been fearful of for a long time.
Right.
Well, it's interesting because her husband does a painting of the nun, right?
Yeah.
And then, and yeah, I mean that character is terrifying, and she's well done, and I do look at that and I think, okay, this was effective because it looks realistic. She has this like very demonic, satanic look to her face, and obviously like she's creepy as shit, but like she's still, I don't know, she's still believable, I think, as a character. And so that I can appreciate. It's when it goes too far and it's just so unbelievable that I can't relate that the special effects start to bother me.
There is something to be said about when they try and push, like, there's a difference between pushing the using too much effects And then, like, if they do that and they're good, that's one thing. But if they do that and the effects aren't that good and it's not very effective,
Mm-hmm.
like it's not adding to the element of horror,
Right.
then you're just, yeah.
Yeah, then you're just doing it to be show offy.
Right.
You know,
You're
they're
like,
show
look how much money we have for this movie. That's
Exactly.
basically what they're saying.
Absolutely. It feels like that. The
yeah.
art gets lost. And,
Right.
and really, I'm sure people would disagree with me, but horror movies are very, very artistic, and they're very thoughtful. And when they're done well, they're amazing. When they're done poorly, they're terrible.
Oh, yeah.
And
It is a very polarizing genre in that aspect where there's no room for middle grounds.
yeah,
Like you were saying.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Are there particular aspects of horror movies that you find more effective than others, like creepy children or old women, or
Both. All of the above.
yeah,
I do appreciate a creepy child.
yeah, like in The Omen.
Like in The Omen. Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, Damien. You know, Children of the Corn is one of my favorites because they're all creepy children. So I appreciate that. Pet Cemetery has just a creepy little toddler.
Right. Yeah.
Which, you know, I have a toddler who can be creepy, not like that, but you know,
Right.
so I appreciate that too. But I think when children get possessed or children turn bad, then there's nothing worse. I mean, it's just because how do you fight a child? You know, how do I think our minds aren't built to be able to understand how that works. You know,
Right.
how do I, you know, especially in Pet Cemetery when the child is like 2.5 or 3. I mean, what am I supposed to do with that? I mean, he's got a knife in his hand. He's coming after me. You know, do I kick him? I don't know. I mean, kind of how I feel about Chucky. Chucky's like a doll. I mean, what do you do with that? You
Right.
know, how do you fight that being a big adult person, you know? So I think it's even worse because I feel we get conflicted and we don't want to hurt children, but they're bad. So
Right.
we do.
Yeah. Yeah. But as audience members, we always have the right answer. Be
Yeah.
like, kick that fucker in the head.
Exactly. Pick him up by his head and shove him out the window. But,
Right.
but you know, but the thing with me is I always try to put myself into the character's position. And so
Right.
what would I do? You know, could I retaliate against a knife wielding toddler? I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I would think that I could.
Yeah, that's what what a lot of people don't want to do when watching horror movies. I mean, that's like, I guess what some people wouldn't consider part of the fun of watching it. I
Right.
mean, because then you have to start using your brain.
Sure.
Because I mean, it's so easy to be like, you know, punt that fucker out the window.
Yeah.
But I mean, if that really is your kid, in real life, and he's got a knife, of course you're gonna be like, he's probably not possessed.
Right,
He
right.
probably is just playing a game.
Yeah. Am I sure? Because
right.
I want to be sure.
Sure, he just tried to shove me down a flight of stairs,
Yeah.
and he's holding a gun.
Right, exactly. Well, yeah, I mean, you'd probably second guess,
Right.
you know, what your next step would be. But so I think that's definitely the scariest because I mean, old women are scary for sure. But I could take out an old woman. You know, I feel like there's certain.
I feel like the old woman in Drag Me to Hell and the old woman from The Shining should get together and go bowling.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Start a bowling team of horrific old women. Like they could like rip off a button from someone's jacket from the other team and like put a curse on them to where like every bowling ball would like go through the roof or
Oh
something like
my
that.
gosh. Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. Those old women, yeah, they are something special. And that's definitely scary too. I mean, when we're talking The Shining though, I mean The Shining is just
It's something
it's in a
else.
league of its own.
Yeah. Stephen King would not agree with us.
Sorry, Stephen King. I
Yeah.
do adore you, but not in this. Yeah, the Shine. I mean,
We
and
could,
we're talking like legit original Shining. Stanley Kubrick, of course.
yeah.
Not Stephen King's intended The Shining.
Yeah, the one that, yeah, I was told that he was like, okay, like people came up to him, they're like, if you promise to stop bad mouthing the Stanley Kubrick adaptation of your movie, we'll let you do, let you have like creative control over whatever you want. And so he did that, what, 8-part miniseries or whatever for,
Yes.
for TV.
Yes.
I never even saw it.
Yes.
I might have been too young, or it just not in the capabilities to be able to see it.
Yeah. I saw it.
Yeah, it was garbage.
I mean, you're not missing out.
Okay.
I mean, it's like 7 parts too long. I mean, really, Stanley Kubrick did an
It was
amazing
just,
job.
yeah, it was just done well the first time.
It was exactly. It's
Yeah.
untouchable.
I think, I mean, he had a few problems with that movie. I think one of them was he didn't agree with the direction that they took Wendy's character with.
Right.
He thought that she was too much of a whiner in the movie, and she wasn't like the strong female character that she was in the book. But like, I haven't read the book. I don't know if you've read the book
I
or
have.
not. Okay. Well, I know that the book and the movie are just, they're not really fair to kind of compare to each other. You just have to kind of take them both at their own speed. But looking at the movie, which I have seen, like, she seems to be a pretty strong character. Like, she basically takes over the whole like running of the was it the Overlook Hotel?
Correct. Yeah.
Yes, like, so Jack can, write his book. Like, he basically doesn't have to do anything. Like, she's doing all that, and she's the one that's swinging the bat at his face when he's chasing her up the stairs.
Right.
So I mean, she didn't really come off to me as a weak female character.
Yeah.
Like maybe not strong in some sense, but she was definitely a strong enough female character for me.
Well, she's her character, and Shelley Duvall is not my favorite actress.
I don't think I've seen her in anything else except that movie.
Yeah, I've seen her in a couple of things. One of them, she played like Mother Goose or something, which also should have been a horror movie, but it wasn't. It's actually something for children, but not good in that movie either. But she's not my favorite actress, but she may not. She's a survivor. She plays a survivor, and at first, the first half of the movie, I think she comes across as, just this like, yes, ma'am, kind of gal, letting her
Right.
husband walk all over her, and she but she takes care of her son. She's the primary caregiver of their child, and she protects her son, and she's a survivor. I mean, she survived Jack with all of his faults before the Overlook. And then obviously she survives what happens there too. So I agree with you. I think she is stronger than Stephen King probably gave her credit for.
Yeah. I'm not exactly sure the other issues that he had with that movie. I know it was more than just that.
Well, I think he even had a problem with Jack, the character, because and I read about it a long time ago, and I forget exactly what was said, but
Wasn't I mean, sorry, go ahead. I was
No,
going to
go ahead.
interject. You were just about to say something, and it reminded me of something that I think I did read, was that in the book, it's perceived that he gets psychotic over time.
Yes.
Okay, was
Yes.
that what you were going to say?
Yes.
Okay, go
and
ahead.
Yeah, so it's something to that nature, and I don't exactly remember what specifically was said, but yeah, it has something to do with the psychosis that Jack
Right.
exhibits, and that he just.
He's basically like, in the movie, you could tell, like, in that first interview, like when he goes up to the hotel to
Yeah.
interview with the hotel owner,
Yeah.
like you could tell that he's like Lincoln Park one step closer to the edge and he's about to break.
Absolutely.
Yeah. He like, but that might also be like Jack Nicholson's, demeanor too, is like, Like,
Right.
you
He
know,
seems a little like there's something off to begin with.
right.
I agree with you. But I thought that he might not have been well, of course he got very visibly psychotic towards the end, but in the beginning you might not, it might have been more subtle, but I still think like he started off that way. I mean, he started off as this, even when they were in the car driving to the Overlook and they're talking about cannibalism and the Donner Party.
Yeah.
And they have this conversation. And of course, Shelley Duvall just, I mean, she sounds like such a moron. But, you know, they're having this conversation and he's creepy and there's something wrong with Jack even in
Something wrong with Jack. Something wrong with Jack.
even in that moment, you know,
Right.
even in that conversation, you just know that shit's gonna go wrong. And so
Yeah. It's the way, like, excuse me. It's the way that he's like answering Danny's questions. Like he's got like both hands on the steering wheel, and you can almost see him like gripping the steering wheel.
oh
Like,
yeah.
like, all right, Danny, I'm kind of fucking sick of. I can't do a good Jack Nicholson impression, but I'm really, really tired of answering your questions right now.
Oh yeah, he's just on the verge.
When
from
you
the-
hear me typing down here, that means that I don't want to be interrupted. I can't remember how that.
oh,
part
it's
goes.
the best.
So that's special effects.
Right, right. There you go. The
Yeah,
Shining.
I told you, you know, we were gonna get off topic, and the fact that there's hardly a topic to begin with. But yeah, so you want to talk about subgenres?
Sure. Yeah. Let's do it.
Do you have a favorite subgenre, or is it not that easy? Do you have like multiple favorite subgenres?
I do have multiple favorites.
Okay.
You know, I think culturally, and really this has been over the past several years, but culturally, zombies have been incredibly popular. I mean, back the original, oh my gosh, the original black and white, not Walking Dead. Now that's all I can think about is The Walking Dead.
Weren't we trying to figure out or decipher the difference between these movies earlier?
Yeah.
There's Evil Dead. And,
Oh my gosh, everything's dead. You know, there's dead Ringer. I mean, yeah.
Night of the Living Dead.
Night of the Living Dead. But, you know, since Night of the Living Dead, zombies have just been just so incredibly popular. And,
Right.
you know, everybody's, I mean, hell, there's going to be the zombie apocalypse, right? That we're all getting ready for, which is why I had LASIK surgery, because I have to be ready when the zombies come. I can't be fumbling for my glasses and that type of thing.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Is that what you told your LASIK surgeon?
Pretty much, yeah. I said, look, sir, doctor, that I don't know if you know that this is coming, but it is. So we gotta take care of this now. So zombies have always fascinated me, and then you have the zombies that are like super slow and you know, and then you have the ones that are like crazy fast,
Like in 21 and 28 Days Later.
yes, which by the way, both amazing.
Or not,
films.
sorry, I said
28 weeks.
28 days and then 28 weeks later.
Yes, which
Sorry,
yeah.
I just fucked that up.
That's okay.
And then fucking up my credibility.
I find you highly credible.
I like 28 Weeks Later a little bit better. Like I thought Cillian Murphy was great in the first one.
Right.
But I thought the score for the second one was awesome. Like just that dramatic, like kind of really dark and depressing score to go along with to kind of pair with the tone of the movie. Man, I need to go rewatch that. Because, like, I do love a good zombie movie. Like, I don't like all of them, but I do like me a good zombie movie every once in a while.
Well, and then you have, so those are both excellent films. And my favorite personally in that genre, that subgenre, is Resident Evil. And there's something about the types of zombies that you encounter in that movie that I think are very realistic. But yet contemporary and you know, because we have the capability of mixing humans with poisons. Our government is doing that, right? Aren't they always doing some sort of experiment?
Makes sense.
And there's the underground umbrella company and all that. So that is very interesting to me, that type of zombie film. And then of course you have like zombie rednecks and zombie, these like
Shaun of the Dead is like one of my favorite movies ever.
that's a good one.
I love it. Like,
Yeah.
I know, we're going to talk later about movies that aren't necessarily classified as horror, but have horror elements, and that could be one. Like, I guess Shaun of the Dead is more of a comedy, but there are parts where people die in that movie.
Absolutely.
So that kind of adds to some of the horror elements, but it's also really funny.
Absolutely. That's a great movie.
So yeah, there's that. What other subgenres are you a fan of?
Well, we mentioned, we've talked about before, like the hillbilly.
Yeah, the hillbilly horror.
Yeah. One of my favorite, and I'm not sure if it's actually a horror movie or not, but Deliverance.
I have never seen Deliverance, but it sounds horrifying.
So yeah, it's pretty. It's like the old school version of The Hills Have Eyes.
Okay.
Just these terrifying hillbilly, redneck, inbred, folks who are just looking to
Fuck someone's life
terrify.
up.
Yeah, just destroy you emotionally, and that's what they do. They break people down, and so it's definitely one of my favorites. But that's definitely old school. And then of course you have The Hills Have Eyes, which is just very creepy, especially when you do a road trip and you're like, oh no, what's in the hills, because that's where the
eyes.
creepy people live. Yeah, they have eyes. They're watching me.
Was there an older Hills Have Eyes, and then because I saw the one that came out, and I guess it was the mid to late 2000s. I saw that one. But
Which is pretty terrifying.
yeah, I remember it being pretty scary.
And then there's Wrong Turn. There were so many that kind of came after that. Yeah, there was an original Hills Have Eyes.
Yeah, and then there's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yes.
Which admittedly I just saw for the first time, and it was kind of silly. Like the very first scene when they like let out the dude in a wheelchair like to go take a piss. And like just a random truck drives by, and like he like flips out and he like flies out of his wheelchair and tumbles down the hill. Like, I was laughing my ass off when I was like, what is happening?
Why is this so funny right now?
Yeah. But like kind of like the climax where she thought that she finally found shelter from the chainsaw wielding Leatherface. And it turns out that it's the dad, right?
Yep.
And so he basically brings her back, and they're like having dinner, and that scene was kind of silly to me, but I can see like at the time that being it kind of used to add to the elements of psychological terror is like putting yourself in that position of like helplessness and hopelessness, and you're tied to a chair that has actual hands on it.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that was just my reaction to that movie. I was like, it's kind of silly, like the opening, like credit crawl, not like credits, but like the dialogue where it's like, this is the story of the Chainsaw Massacre. I was like, holy shit! Like, I didn't realize we were doing this.
Yeah.
That was so that kind of, I thought that was kind of cool to get you in the right mindset.
Well, it felt like a documentary.
Yeah.
Which,
for sure.
When we think of documentaries, we think of truth,
Yeah.
right? Truth, reality. And so I love movies that start off that way, or based on a true story, you know, and then they kind of go through the history, because it's supposed to feel realistic. Good horror movies are supposed to feel realistic. And if it sets up the expectation of, hey, this is real, this actually happened, these folks are real, these victims are real, then you can definitely put yourself in their position, and that's what does make it scary.
Yeah.
What about Devil's Rejects?
Yeah, that's like Rob Zombie has his own like genre of horror,
Yeah.
and I don't even know what to call it. Like it's not slasher. I mean, I guess the closest you can consider it is just like gore, I
Mm-hmm,
guess.
mm-hmm,
But it almost could be classified as like hillbilly
mm-hmm,
horror.
mm-hmm.
Um,
It feels very like Hills Have Eyes slash Texas Chainsaw Massacre
yeah.
slash. I mean, just this group of family members who are really in cahoots. And I
Hmm.
think that's what's really scary too about some of those movies is because you have the incest part.
Yeah.
They're all family,
Yeah.
and so you escape one just to get into the arms of another, and the sheriff is in on it, and the dad is in on it, and the brother. And,
Yeah, it's a really fun way to tell a horror movie story because instead of getting your viewpoint from the victims,
mm-hmm,
you're getting the viewpoint from like the murders,
mm-hmm.
which I think is a really creative way to tell a story. Did you see the his was it Halloween remake?
I did.
Did you like that?
I did.
I liked it too. I thought it was pretty
Oh,
cool.
it was great. I think the way that they portrayed Michael Myers, his character.
He was
I
very
mean, it
tall.
was, yeah.
He was like 9 feet tall in that
Yeah,
movie. He
and
was like,
I mean it was scary.
yeah,
It was, and that goes again back to like kids be, the scariness of kids that become killers because here's
right.
this little boy who, yeah, okay, his family is kind of messed up, but he just all of a sudden kind of just snaps and just that's it. He just like murders everybody and there's something particularly horrifying about that, about
Yeah.
when kids kill like that. And then, yeah, he turns into this ginormous,
Stabbing
larger
monster.
than life,
Yeah.
mask loving mental patient who
Right.
just, yeah.
I think it was Danny Trejo who's in
Yes.
that movie
He is.
for a second. And like Danny Trejo's a pretty big dude. And I just remember him like towering over him.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, all right, well, he's huge.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah. I'm trying to think of some subgenres that I really like. I really like sci-fi stuff. Um,
Like alien type stuff.
yeah, I really like. We were talking about VHS earlier.
Yeah.
On our list of movies that we really like. The classic and contemporary, and I think my favorite anthology story from VHS was, I think it was the very last one that had to do with like the alien invasion. Do you remember that one? Yeah, where it's just like it starts out simple enough where it's like like a big sleepover with like the little boys and then like I think his sister is like having some friends over or something like that, and it just escalates quickly, just like with all these sounds and stuff, and the fact that it's kind of filmed like a found footage type thing, which is also another kind of polarizing genre or subgenre within horror, is that sometimes found footage isn't really done that well, but there are plenty of times where I think it's very effective. Like I know Blair Witch Project it's kind of like it was one of the very first found footage movies.
It was.
Like it kind of sets the landscape for all the found footage movies to come after it.
Right.
And that movie was also polarizing. Like people either loved it or hated it. And if they hated it, they probably hated it because they got sick. Because
Like
of the shaky cam.
Cloverfield. Did you see Cloverfield?
Yes.
So that was kind of one of those where you could get motion sickness from physically watching it.
Yeah.
But there's Paranormal Activity.
I happen to really like that franchise.
I absolutely do too.
Okay, I particularly like the third one. I know that's kind of specific, but part of it is is because it takes place in California.
Yes.
I think they all take place in California.
They do. San Diego specifically.
Yeah, but the house that they're living in the third one looks so much like the house that I used to live in. Just like how, You know, they had like closet doors that were all like full length mirrors,
Yeah.
and it's just the aesthetic was very like late 80s, early
Uh-huh.
90s feel to it.
Yeah.
And you know, there's just a couple of scenes in that movie that I remember just scaring the shit out of me when I went to go see it in theaters. Like the whole suspense of setting the camera on top of the oscillating fan,
Yes.
and just the suspense of like it going just back and forth, and like just shaking in your seat waiting to see what's gonna happen when it comes back. Like you see it kind of follows her to go answer the door, and she opens it and no one's there, and she comes back and all the furniture and all the appliances and stuff
Yep.
are missing from the kitchen, and it's just all fucking fly down from the ceiling. I was like,
Well, and you know what's so powerful about that type of use of technology is that we as a society, we're all about, and we talked a bit about the voyeuristic, but we love to get everything on film.
right.
We love to have our security cameras set up in our house. We love to, whenever someone robs a liquor store, like check that security footage. We use our iPhones and we film everything. And to have something be filmed and then seemingly innocent, and then to go back and look at it and see something incredibly creepy and disturbing happen. I mean, that can give you chills.
Yeah.
Especially like you were saying with the panning of the camera
Yeah.
and just there's nothing there and everything seems normal, and then all of a sudden it's not. You know?
Yeah, because when the camera pans back to the kitchen for just a second, you're like, what is she looking at? Because you can see her like looking at the kitchen, like
Right.
very bewildered, and you're like, what is she looking at? And then you realize that everything's missing, like the kitchen table, like all the appliances are gone from the counters.
Yep.
Yeah, and then like the scene where like the girls are like playing upstairs, and she's like walking the banister, and then she just jumps down, and you're like, what?
Yeah, I mean that's scary. That is scary, and I appreciate that series a lot.
Yeah, the turn that movie makes, where they take the girls to what their grandmothers, the
And then
dude's
they're
grandmas,
like witches.
yeah, and it's basically just a coven.
Yeah, exactly.
Where they're like, we're so glad you came. We've been expecting you. Now it's time to eat your soul.
Yeah, I know, and it's like what? But then it makes sense because it kind of ties it all back into really the first two.
Yeah, that's I can't remember if is that kind of where that whole story arc died off, was the third one, or did it kind of continue after that? Because I know there's been a Paranormal Activity 4, and then there's kind of been like a couple others after that, like just recently in the past couple of years that were, I don't know,
Disappointing. Sorry.
No, yeah. I mean, I didn't see them. Like I think they're on Amazon Prime. And I was looking at them trying to figure out if I wanted to watch them to kind of get me in the right headspace for this episode. And I was like, they seem like they could be good, but also at the same time very disappointing.
Yeah,
So
pretty disappointing.
I think the last one I saw was the one that came. Was it after 3? It was the one.
In the apartment complex?
It was the one where the girl was chatting with, doing the video chat with her boyfriend, I think. I might be. I hope I'm not thinking of a different movie.
You're totally thinking of it. No, I don't know. You might be thinking of that movie. I'm trying to think because there's one where they're in an apartment complex.
Okay.
And there's some disappearances, and it's definitely after the third one, and it's terrible. And I've tried to watch. I think you're right. After the third, it seems a little unrelated. The first three, the third one ties everything together. They make sense chronologically. They reference each other, and then it's like after that they just don't. They seem unrelated.
Right.
The ones that follow.
Yeah, it seems like after that, when you the filmmakers decide to make more but unrelated to the original storyline, they're just cashing in on the money machine.
Absolutely, and nothing pisses me off more.
Yeah, I can imagine being a horror movie purist. just using it for financial gain instead of actually caring about the final product that
Right.
comes from it.
And what's interesting is directors and actors that are a part of horror and sci-fi, um, they have to have a passion because it is so specific and it's just not everybody's cup of tea. And I feel like the especially the directors, that's their thing. I mean, they have to care. So when a movie's churned out and it's just like a complete piece of shit, that it just and so synthetic, there's nothing worse. And I feel like the just nobody cared about the film. And those types of films should just go away unless they're there to show us how good all the other ones are. But I really feel like the actors and the directors that produce good films, good horror films, they have to be obsessed and they have
Right.
to be passionate
Oh
about
yeah,
it,
for sure. Yeah.
especially to play those kinds of roles that are disturbing, that can be disturbing.
Yeah.
So
Let's one of my favorite subgenres is like psychological horror.
yeah.
And this is a perfect opportunity for us and I'm talking like what do we say like the Alfred Hitchcock movies like Rear Window or do you know what I'm talking about? It's when he breaks his legs. It also it's Jimmy Stewart. And he breaks his legs and he fuck, what's the name of that movie? Oh my god, I'm gonna have to look it up. But yeah, that and Psycho,
Like the birds.
and the birds. Yeah, Rear Window has James Stewart and Grace Kelly. Basically, he breaks his legs and he's in a wheelchair and he it's kind of like Disturbia,
Okay.
the movie with
Yes.
Shia LaBeouf where he
Yes.
gets but much better.
Okay.
Where he basically spends his entire time like spying on all his neighbors, and so he's like he knows exactly when they do stuff, at what specific times of the day, and it's been so long since I've seen it, but he sees like something go down, and so yeah, he's kind of like suspecting that there's something fishy going on in his old neighborhood.
There's that voyeurism again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But what I was talking about, Perfect Opportunity, the new It movie. I figure we can maybe talk about that for a few minutes because that's kind of the latest horror movie to come out that's worth a goddamn.
Yeah.
It's, I mean,
In years.
yeah. So yeah, let's talk about it for a
Okay,
few minutes.
okay.
So we both liked it, or loved it.
Yes.
I still have yet to see the original.
Yeah.
And I've been told that it's both scary and it still holds up, and then other people have said, "Oh, it's kind of silly." What are your feelings on that? Like the original, like do you feel like it still holds up?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah. And maybe it's because I saw it so soon after it came out that it terrified me.
Right.
And again, if you are putting it, maybe just looking at it at face value, you may not think it's that terrifying. But if you're putting it in context and you're actually putting yourself in the characters' positions, I mean, it's unbelievably frightful. And I think that some of it, the problem with the original It is that some of it can seem a little bit slow. And you forget that you're watching a horror movie, but that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because then when there is this like creepy, scary scene, you're like, oh my God, what the hell?
Right.
You know, they're at the library, they're joking around, they open the refrigerator and their friend's head is in the refrigerator. And it's like, what? You know, I mean, it's those types of moments where, or my favorite is when they're at dinner and the friends are all together and there's this like happy, upbeat music and they're telling jokes and not literally throwing peanuts at each other, but figuratively throwing peanuts at each other. And hey, man, yeah, hey, woo, catch this, and that type of thing. And then all of a sudden, just like they open their fortune cookies and just the creepiest shit happens. And, baby chickens that are bleeding come out of this fortune cookie. And, it's creepy and it's terrifying, and it's because you weren't really expecting it. So
Right.
that's what's amazing about that movie. But I
Okay.
could see some people thinking, oh, most of it is so boring and uneventful. But that's what makes the rest of it so brilliant.
Okay.
Are those moments.
Cool. I'll do you own it on?
I do, but unfortunately,
It's
again,
on
it's one of those
VHS?
VHSers. Yeah, I have
I need
quite
to.
the collection.
Have you made it out to McKay's bookstore
I
since
have
you
not,
moved here? Okay.
but I've heard about it.
Yeah, I you might have heard about it from me.
Okay.
Because I talk about it often. Yeah, it's a great new and used bookstore. It's a great place to fund parties and stuff because I funded my birthday party one year by
awesome.
just selling a bunch of random stuff that I
Okay.
didn't need anymore. But yeah, maybe I can find a VHS player there.
Yeah, we used to have a dual one, and we might somewhere in the garage.
Ooh,
but
fancy.
I know, right? Yeah, we're like, whoa, we can play two things.
Right.
But I do have a lot of my horror movies are in VHS,
Right.
and I remember when Blockbuster, which I don't, or maybe it was even the Warehouse. Like you used to rent videos from Blockbuster in the Warehouse, and I think the Warehouse went out of business. Maybe Blockbuster might still be around somewhere, but they would sometimes sell their VHS tapes, and I would buy them if they were horror, like
Yeah.
with my, like babysitting money or whatever. And so I have a lot of the old school, like Tales from the Crypt and that kind of thing on
Nice.
VHS. So it is on VHS. It's on 2 VHS tapes.
Right, yeah. Yeah, because it's pretty long, right?
It's just that long. Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
what is it, like 3 or 4 hours?
It's probably close to 4. Yeah, maybe
'cause
3
it was
and a half
like
or 4.
originally like a TV miniseries,
It
sort
was,
of, right?
Yep, it
okay.
was. And that can kind of throw you off too, because some of the breaks for commercial are totally inappropriate.
Yeah,
So when you're watching the movie, it's like, wow, that was an odd place to break for commercial. So
Right.
that can be a little distracting too. But if you're just again putting yourself in the actors' positions or the characters' positions, it's terrifying. I
right.
mean, clowns often are.
Yeah.
They come from the sewer.
Well, without seeing the first one,
Uh-huh.
the original, I was a huge fan of the reboot or remake
Mm-hmm.
or whatever you want to call it. I thought they did an awesome job casting Bill Skarsgård as Pennywise.
Yes.
I've seen interviews with him, like with Conan, and man, that fucking smile that he does is so good. Like,
It's just, I know, it's unreal.
yeah. And the parts that were utilized with him to be horrific, like the whole shaky like thing
Yeah.
that he does, like that was terrifying. And like when he comes up from the water, that was terrifying. And like the whole opening scene with him in the sewer drain, talking to Georgie, like I thought that was so well done as an opening scene, especially like with him like laughing with him, like
yeah.
trying to get him like, and then all of a sudden he just goes serious face, and Georgie's like, "What the fuck is happening?"
Oh yeah, I mean it's stranger danger at like its
Yeah.
purest form.
Yeah.
I mean, and what's interesting about that particular scene is that here's this kid who's playing with his boat, and here's this clown in a sewer drain, and the clown is almost endearing. He's charismatic, and yet like he's creepy as shit. But they're holding a somewhat normal conversation as if like a child were to talk to a car that were to stop by, or a child talking to like the ice cream man or something like that.
Yeah.
Where it's creepy, but it's a totally realistic situation that a child could have, aside from the clown in the drain. But I mean, just meeting a stranger and, oh, I shouldn't talk to you. Oh, but he's making me laugh. Oh,
Yeah,
but he's
it
gonna
almost.
get my boat.
Yeah, it's almost. It seems like if you were to sit down with like your 7 or 8 year old kid and watch the movie and this scene in particular, it almost seems like the parent would find it more horrifying than the kid would be.
Sure.
Because imagining your kid like talking to some like dude dressed as a clown in a sewer is fucking terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, that kind of goes, back to, what, watching horror movies at a younger age, one of the things that could happen.
Absolutely. And I wasn't afraid of clowns when I was
I
little.
was neither. Clown, like, I know, I talked to several people, like, when, the marketing for the movie was insane, like, and all the hype and everything. It seems like everyone was talking about it, right before it came out and while it was out, and everyone was just like, oh my God, just drop whatever you're doing.
Run and buy a ticket.
Raid your penny jar, if you have to, and go see the movie.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I did. And, I had something that I was gonna go. Did you have a particular scene from the movie that you liked most? Because I definitely have a scene that was my favorite.
Well, you tell me yours.
It was the projector scene.
Oh,
when they're flipping through the projector and
Yeah.
they're like, turn it off, and of course, it's spinning on its own.
Sure.
And all of a sudden he jumps out of the projector. But I mean, it's not. He's like giant.
Yeah.
And like that scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
Like both psychologically and like as far as jump scares. Like we can talk all day about how jump scares are such a cop out in horror movies. Because you can get anyone with a jump scare.
Sure.
But to combine that with like psychological and physical terror, it can be used, effectively.
Absolutely. And that's a really good point.
yeah.
Because that's a prime example of it being used well.
Yeah.
Where 99% of the time it's not used well.
Right.
It does serve a purpose though, because we do like to be scared. Well, I do. Maybe not everybody, but we do have a physical reaction to boo,
Yeah.
And so those types of scares, I think, definitely serve a purpose. But in that particular instance, it's brilliant. It's super effective, and it works.
Right. Would you say that that's your favorite scene, or do you have a different one?
Oh,
I mean, you don't have to have a favorite scene. I
Yeah.
just wanted to say that was my favorite scene in the
I think
movie.
my favorite scene, and really I prefer it more in the original, so when you see it, we can talk about it
Okay.
more, but the scene in the bathroom with the blood.
That was so good.
Yeah.
I totally forgot about that scene. But even remembering it, I still think that the projector scene was good.
Yeah.
But that's the scene that I thought of when I wanted to talk about like practical effects versus
Right.
special effects,
Right.
because it really seemed like they found a way to pump fake blood up through the
Yes.
through the sink drain.
Yeah. And they do it equally well in the original.
Yeah.
I think the most terrifying part of that scene for me is that there's all this blood, and yet her daddy can't see it.
Right.
He comes in and he's like, "What's wrong, baby girl? And he's talking to her and she's just like shaking. And that to me is just the worst, because when you to be a child, and I remember this, not that I had a scene like that, but I
Sure.
remember being a child and having like something happen or seeing something that I thought was odd, and grown-ups don't believe you. And you think, okay, did that really happen? Can grown-ups just not see certain things? That's so scary. It's such a scary feeling to have someone not believe you when you're seeing something, and then you think you're crazy. Am I crazy? Does my dad just not believe me? So that was definitely my favorite scene, really, from both,
Right.
because of that aspect.
Did you hear about the theory where the fact that tricks are for kids, and the fact that they're not shapes anymore is because we're adults now and we can't see the shapes? That's the
No.
reason why they're all just circles, kind of like kicks.
No, but that's fascinating.
It's just this random meme that I came across on the internet, where it was one of those like headcanon type things where it's like, what if, because whenever this happened, a few years ago, I can't remember. I mean, if you remember, tricks used to be like little shapes.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I think they were in the shape of fruits or something like
Uh-huh.
that.
Uh-huh.
Whatever they
They
were
were.
in they were in individual shapes.
Yeah.
And not just like circles like they
Right.
are now.
Right.
And the meme was like, what if what if tricks are all the same they're all just circles now because we're adults and tricks are really for kids. And I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
What?
Really?
I was
Yeah.
like, I think I need to go lie down for 45 minutes.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
But seriously.
Yeah.
Well, and that goes back to babies and kids and stuff seeing things that we don't see
Right.
as adults. And at what point do you stop being able to see things like that?
Right.
And even in Paranormal Activity with the baby, babies are and children too are in, especially in horror movies, notoriously perceptive, and they're gonna see the ghost before you do, and they're gonna that's why kids get possessed all the time, right? I guess because they can see things we can't see as adults. So at what point do you lose the ability to see and feel those things?
Right.
But that's really interesting and really creepy.
Yeah.
That's creepy too. It's a very creepy tricks thing.
Was her dad in that in the original, like the abusive? Okay, I wasn't
Yeah.
sure if he was like abusive like he was in the new one.
I think it's a little bit more, if I can remember correctly, more implied. Although you can tell. I mean, he's definitely abusive. But I think in the newer version, or the newer adaptation, it's I mean it's very obvious that this guy is like super creep.
Right.
And in the older one, I think it's a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more
Sure.
subtle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although he does, I think, strike her a couple of times, but so yeah, but the character is very similar.
Cool.
I think, yeah.
What other subgenres you want to talk about? What can we classify The Ring as? Because that's one of my favorite contemporary horror movies. I mean, I know
Sure.
it's going on like 18 years old. I mean, it's getting up there, but I still
Yeah.
consider it contemporary because it's past the turn of the century.
Right.
And I just recently rewatched it, and it like it still looks like it could have been done yesterday.
Absolutely.
As far as the special effects and stuff, and that's kind of going back to our special effects talk, is that's I mean, pretty much all the horrific elements of that movie as far as visuals go, I mean, almost all of it was computer generated, but that's a perfect instance of it being done very well,
Right.
to add to the horror of the movie.
Right. It feels seamless in
Yeah.
The Ring. And I mean, I would say that it's more like supernatural. I mean, obviously the girls like crawling out of TVs and that kind of
Right.
thing.
The normal stuff.
Normal stuff. Yeah. What girls, dead girls do. So, but yeah, I mean, and The Ring is so, there's nothing else like it.
Yeah.
It was so,
Except the Japanese original.
except Ringu, right?
Right.
Which is,
Yeah.
which is exactly like it. Actually, I did see Ringu, I think, at one point, and
Is that any good?
I don't remember, so it couldn't have been that good because
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure. I can't really remember, but I did see it because I was interested.
Yeah,
in-
I know the U.S. kind of had a short stint where we created the bandwagon of reimagining Japanese movies,
Yes.
not just horror, but like a lot of Japanese
Folklore.
Yeah, like good movies. Old Boy is it's not a horror movie, but that was a very popular Japanese action movie, and they redid it with Josh Brolin and someone. It wasn't nearly as good as the original, but yeah, if you're into action movies, or if Travis is into action movies, you should definitely see that one.
I'm definitely not, but
No?
Travis
Okay, cool.
might be.
All right, well, good talk.
So I probably won't ever see that movie.
All right, well, fair enough.
No,
But yeah,
but you're
going
right.
back. Yeah, going back to the ring.
Yeah, no. So there is, and there's that fascination because we have a fascination with the other, I think, and the other in quotations, and Japanese films are so they're terrifying anyway, in their own right, and then. And it's so different from what we're used to. So when we have something like The Ring come out, it's like it blows our minds, you know, because Japanese horror filmmakers terrify in a very different way, and they don't use the typical shock value. But what's also interesting too is that they do base a lot of their films on like folklore and storytelling and superstition. So I could definitely see The Ring as like more of a supernatural superstition type.
Yeah, because
movie.
there is the whole 7 days aspect,
Right.
Where you can. I mean, and the movie even starts out with them talking about like the watching the movie, and they're like talking about it as a superstitious tale,
Right.
and they both get each other with the whole like did you watch it? No, I didn't really watch it,
Yeah.
but she actually did watch it.
Right.
Like especially when the phone rings and they're like, "Oh my god," and she answers it, and she's just got like this blank look on her face for a solid 20 seconds, and she hands it to her friend, and she's like, "Oh, hey, mom."
Yeah. Gotcha. And
Yeah.
then whoops, actually.
Right.
A few minutes later.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Grudge is very similar.
It's been a while since I've seen that one, but I remember
Yeah.
having a similar reaction to The Grudge.
Yeah,
Really
and that's
liking that one.
just highly, highly superstitious. Just and people don't like to talk about it. You know, nobody likes to talk about it, and I think that's what makes it scary too. When superstition or folklore is so hush hush that people are afraid to even mention the name. Don't say the name, you know,
Right.
of the monster
Voldemort.
or whomever it is. Is that a Lord of the Rings thing?
Voldemort? That's from Harry Potter.
Okay, I haven't watched Harry Potter.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Shauna. No. We said she was credible for horror movies, not for popular children and adult magic stuff.
Yeah,
So-
I'm sorry. I've heard it's amazing. I know I have friends that watch it. Does that count? Right.
No, when you said like when you're not even supposed to say their name, I was like Voldemort, because like there's multiple parts of Harry Potter where Harry Potter himself, and his friends, they bring up the whole like we should be saying his name because there's certain times where like people believe that he's dead and that there's no way he could come back, and they're starting to believe that he could come back, and then he is coming back, and Harry's philosophy is that if we start saying his name, then it makes him less of a threat.
Yes.
And more of this tangible person
Right.
that you could overcome.
And that's what's so interesting about Nightmare on Elm Street, because
Yeah, that's a
what
big
gives
trope in
him
that movie.
power is to think about him
Yeah.
and to talk about him, because when everybody forgot, then he was just in the dreams and nobody, but then talking about him, being afraid, that fed him. So it's interesting because acknowledging a particular demon or monster can sometimes give them power, and then sometimes it can do the opposite, and it can weaken them or make them, like you said, more tangible. More of like this, hey, he's not this like scary mythical guy, he's like an actual guy that we can defeat.
Right.
So even though I haven't seen the series yet,
You're fine. You got,
but I will, and I'll love it.
for people that are like listening and like throwing their fists in the air like in anger, like how could you not see Harry Potter? Relax, take a chill pill. She has 3 kids, so just relax, okay?
And my husband is a huge fan,
Yeah,
and
and
so,
he's been like like forcing her against
Yes.
her will to
Yes.
watch these damn movies.
Yeah. Like switching the channel when I'm not looking, and I'm like, "What's that? Who's that?"
Yeah.
And the it's magical hat or whatever. The
The Sorting Hat.
the sorting. Who tells me what family I'm in? So sometimes I catch glimpses.
I'm going to be so proud when you finally finish them all and get to the point where you call me or Lindsay up and be like, guess what house I was just sorted into?
Right. I knew I was the house of those snakes that can talk in snake tongue. Right?
Oh no!
Shock value.
What are you doing?
I'm talking
It's okay.
to the people.
We can cut this part out.
Okay. I'm talking to the people. Honey, I'll come down in a minute, baby.
Yeah, we're almost done.
Boo. That was appropriate.
Ah! Oh no! Yeah. So yeah, Harry Potter. That's a horror movie, right?
Yeah, right? I mean, I would say.
Yeah. Let's close it out with talking about some movies that aren't necessarily classified as horror but have horror elements to them. Did you make a note of any movies that you thought of?
That I thought of or I stole from you. No. Just kidding.
Either or. I mean, that you like. You can name one that you stole from me, but you have your own thoughts on.
Okay. Well, we talked about
Because I have one or two that I listed off that I know you said you hadn't seen, so I can talk about those.
okay. Well, I know we talked about Donnie Darko.
Yes. Yeah, that we were talking about how it's almost like thriller sci-fi, but that fucking bunny, man.
Oh man, that bunny, yeah.
Why are you wearing that stupid bunny suit? Why are you wearing that stupid man suit?
You're like, what?
And that movie actually, I think, just celebrated one of its anniversaries. I think might have been its 17th anniversary. I think it came out in 2001. It just popped up on my time hop where it was like Donnie Darko, it's like,
Happy birthday.
yeah, basically. It has Jake Gyllenhaal and he's super young.
Yeah.
It actually has his sister Maggie Gyllenhaal
Yes.
in it too for a couple seconds.
Yep.
But yeah, there are. I think one thing that adds to the horror element of that movie is the score, like we were talking about earlier, with scores adding to almost being a character of itself.
Absolutely.
In the movie. Just that won't. I mean, I can't really do it justice. But
I can't either. So
yeah.
okay.
But I mean, and anyone else that's seen the movie knows exactly what we're talking about. That kind of it repeats itself multiple times throughout the movie, and it's just adding to the whole like, oh my god, like what the hell is happening?
What is going on? Yeah, and I think too, Jake Gyllenhaal did an amazing job.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I just that kind of acting blows my mind away. It's when you forget that they're actually actors.
Yeah.
And he just he's brilliant. And his reaction, I think, makes it scary. His reaction to everything. And yeah, the bunny, I mean, the bunny is terrifying. And the bunny, I still think about the bunny.
Yeah. That would be an amazing Halloween costume to have.
It really would.
Which is actually surprising that I haven't ever seen. Like, I mean, not surprising that I haven't seen like trick or treating because it's a little scary for kids. But I've been to multiple like conventions, like anime conventions and geek conventions, and I've never seen anyone cosplay as the bunny from Donnie Darko. And I know that the costume exists out there somewhere. I've never personally researched, but I know someone has had to make this costume and sell it to someone.
Okay, so that's what we're doing. We're
right.
making the costumes.
Just be two bunnies.
Just crazy bunnies.
Two bunnies out on the town.
Yeah. Doing what bunnies do.
Right. And we'll just hope that someone's like, what are you doing wearing that stupid bunny costume? And be like, why are you wearing that stupid man costume? That would be the ultimate.
And if nobody asks, we'll like write it on a piece of paper and we'll just shove it in someone's face.
Oh,
and they
yeah.
can ask us because we'll have to use that line.
Yeah.
But we should do that. That would be interesting. That would be
great.
cool. Yeah.
A good transition from Donnie Darko would be, have you seen Nocturnal Animals yet?
I
It's
have not.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
It also has Jake Gyllenhaal in it. It's for you and anyone listening, it's currently on HBO Go.
Okay.
So you can check it out that way. If you can't, you should rent it. Find a place to rent it or buy it.
Like Blockbuster.
Oh God bless Blockbuster. I miss them so much. Anyways, Jake Gyllenhaal, he was in Nocturnal Animals. So was Amy Adams and a bunch of other people. And it's not necessarily a horror movie. You could almost consider it like an art house type film. But it kind of takes place in three different timelines that kind of interweave throughout the entire movie. One is like the current day with Amy Adams, and she's divorced from Jake Gyllenhaal's character, and they met in college, and he wanted to be a writer really bad, and she's now of course they're now divorced, and she's like, I think, an art curator. And a very successful one because she lives in a really nice house. And the movie kind of opens up where, she's doing her job or whatever, and Jake Gyllenhaal finally sends her a script that he's been working on for a really long time, and she starts to read it, and that's the second part of the movie that kind of interweaves it throughout the movie, is that she's reading it, but like it, plays out like part of the movie. And then the third part of the movie is them, like their relationship early on, like when they met in college. But the middle part where like she's reading the actual book is to me the most interesting, because it's like a metaphor for their relationship, how certain things happened in their relationship, and he uses death to symbolize the end of their relationship in the story. It just in a fantastic way.
Right.
So I definitely suggest seeing this movie if you're a fan of drama and horror and stuff like that. It definitely, it's not a horror movie, but it has some horrific elements to it.
That's awesome. So not in the classic sense, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, like I said, it's more of like a weird art house type movie. The opening credit sequence is so fucking bizarre. It's just like three gigantic, overweight, obese women, totally naked, doing like these slow motion dances, but they're wearing like marching band hats and like twirling batons, but they're like completely naked. And it's so weird. And like I started watching this movie at work, another movie that I watched at work.
On a slow day.
Yeah, on a slow day, of course. And like I had it up full screen because I just went on lunch, and so I started watching it. I had it on full screen. I think I was like opening up like my sandwich or something like that, and I looked up and just boom, like naked women on the screen. I was like, fuck. Like trying to like close it.
Minimize.
Yeah, and luckily like pretty much everyone around me had already gone to lunch.
Perfect.
So no one saw me staring at obese naked women.
Which really set the tone for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, I really don't understand what that has to do with the rest of the movie. And that really doesn't go into spoiler territory, because I'm serious. I really honestly don't understand what it has to do with the rest of the movie. So if you do,
I'll let you know.
Yeah, you can let me know. If anyone else that's listening has an idea of what that has to do with the rest of the movie, feel free to hit me up on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, whatever. Did you write any other movies down?
So one of my favorites, and I guess it's more fantasy, but definitely scared the shit out of me, was Pan's Labyrinth.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You know, that movie just, my God. I mean, I again, like in just a league of its own. And the characters, you know, the guy with the finger, you know, I mean, just.
That dude, that actor, he's played, I forget what the actor's name is, but he's been in so much stuff. He's played like little niche roles like that. Like, I can't even think of, so like it was one of those video montages that you see on Facebook where like, you might have recognized this actor, he's actually been in, you know, all these movies, and it's just a shit ton of movies that
Right.
that guy's been in. But anyways, go ahead.
I mean, but that's just a
Yeah.
prime example for me.
Putting his eyes in his hands and
Yes.
putting them up on his face.
I mean, terrifying.
Yeah.
Terrifying. Even that thing that's growing under the bed, that root baby or whatever that's growing under the bed.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've seen it. I need to go back for a refresher.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those that every time you watch it, you discover something else about it that you didn't realize before, and it just makes it better. It just gets better every time you watch it.
That her stepdad or whoever her mom marries, he's a real dick.
Yeah,
I remember that part.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that's a good one that just sort of creeps into horror thriller, just because of how screwed up the characters are and how creepy and gross they are. And,
Right.
So for me, that definitely made my list.
Let's see. We were talking about the Grindhouse double feature
Yeah.
with Planet Terror
Yeah.
and Death Proof.
Yep.
That's kind of Tarantino's only dabble in what could be considered horror, but it's also kind of funny. I mean, it ends up really funny to me.
Sure.
I mean, you know, with Kurt Russell getting a fucking boot to the face.
Yeah.
But yeah, do you remember Planet Terror? Like, I remember seeing it. I've only seen it once, so you might have a more refreshed knowledge of the movie than I do.
Yeah. So, what's interesting about Planet Terror is you do have that element of humor, and but yet you have these moments of extreme gore, like when Rose McGowan loses her leg,
Right.
and straps on that that machine gun or whatever it is. And she's all of a sudden this, incredibly powerful female, and she has to avenge like her boyfriend and her unborn child's father's death and all this stuff. And but it definitely has this super creepy aspect to it. I remember one of the scenes I remember the most is when everybody ends up at that chili house. Well, I don't know if it's a chili house, but it's a restaurant.
Yeah, he's working on the secret ingredient for his barbecue sauce.
Okay, that's right.
And
Not
it
chili,
turns out
barbecue.
that it's just a little bit of blood. Yeah. Yeah, he's trying to figure out what the special ingredient he's missing, and he's like, that does it. I remember like the zombie that's at his back door or whatever. He's like, you gotta stand there, you gotta come eat.
And that's what's so cool about that movie is because it really is. It is a zombie movie,
Right.
but then not really. I mean, it's very multidimensional.
Yeah.
And then you have this love story thrown in, with this, this couple that they dated a long time ago, and then they're reunited, and she still has his jacket, and she's like, I love you, and you have that aspect of it.
Yeah.
But it definitely fits in the horror category. But yeah, that and Death Proof are definitely some of my favorites. We were talking about the scene in Death Proof where he puts her in the car.
Yeah.
Kurt Russell puts her in the car.
Yeah,
Puts Rose McGowan again in the car.
Yeah, the two scenes that I could really consider like horrific is that scene. He's like, I mentioned that this car is death proof, but to get the full effect, you really got to be sitting in my seat. And she just gets bounced off the walls, and then there's that scene. And then adding to the gore factor is when he's like, all right, now I got to catch up with my other girlfriends. And so he speeds past them and then turns his car around. And just the fact that, you see like 4 or 5 different shots
Yes.
of that car crash, his car crashing into the other car, and like one girl's got her leg like
Yep.
sticking out the window, and it
So
just
that-
shoots off.
Yes.
Like that's like my favorite part
Yes.
of that little montage.
Yes, and I think about that when I see people with their feet hanging
I'm
out
like,
the
you
window.
want your leg to go
yeah,
flying?
Yeah, because that could totally happen.
Yeah.
You know, it happens a lot, I think. You
Yeah.
know, where just people are plowing into each other and limbs are flying. And yeah, I mean, that I still think about that every time I'm in the car and I see someone sticking an arm or a leg out the window. Like,
Yeah.
do you really want that thing to come flying off?
Right.
Because it does sometimes.
Yeah. So there's that scene, or those 2 scenes, and then the one later on in the movie where he is he's kind of terrorizing the what is it?
Rosario Dawson.
Yeah, Rosario Dawson, and then the one I can't remember if she's Australian or if she's from New Zealand.
I
but
think she might be Australian, but yes, I know who you're talking. She's like that kick-ass. Like,
yeah, and she's a kind of a reoccurring character in a couple
Mm-hmm.
of Tarantino movies. Like she was in the Hateful Eight movie for a few seconds. But yeah, so it's the scene where they're like taking turns riding on the hood of the car.
Yes.
And then Kurt Russell is terrorizing them.
Yeah.
And it kind of ends with where they both kind of get driven off the road. And he's like out of his car. He's like, "Whoa! Now that was fun!" And then they just fucking shoot his ass, and they chase his ass down. And that's kind of where the horror element ends.
Yeah.
But yeah, like talk about like mixing multiple, multiple genres inside one movie.
Yep.
And Tarantino is your director to do it.
Yeah, smart guy. Well, the thing is that they're all such realistic. I mean, am I going to stick my foot out the window and have something like that happen? I don't know, but it totally could.
Yeah.
I mean, I could imagine something like that happening, and that whole like meeting the stranger on the freeway and having just shit go wrong.
Right.
It goes back to even urban legends of, if someone has their lights off, you're not supposed to flash. Their headlights. You're not supposed to flash your headlights because they might turn around and come after you and kill you. So it's always that, like, you never know who you're going to meet on the road type thing. And I mean, it turns out well, pretty much at the end. But the whole time you're just like, oh my God, this is a nightmare.
Right.
So it's I would definitely put that in a horror category.
Yeah. The one that I was telling you about earlier, We Need to Talk About Kevin. This is a crazy art house film that's there's this one and another movie by Gus Van Sant called Elephant. Elephant is kind of I feel like it was mirrored after the Columbine shootings.
Okay.
But not to a T. It's kind of loosely based off of that, because you have it's almost a voyeuristic look into a couple different students' lives at this high school, because it almost like follows them while they walk around at school. So it's almost like looking over their shoulder, like that type of look into their lives. And so while all this normal stuff is going on, like your normal average, for the most part, everyday lives of these high school students, these other 2 students were obviously bullied or are living very messed up lives, whether it's consequences of bad parenting or bullying or whatever, but they're planning on shooting up the school, and chaos definitely ensues. So there's that one, and then We Need to Talk About Kevin. Has Ezra Miller, who's going to be the new Flash in the Justice League movie. But this came out, I don't know, maybe like 5-6 years ago, and he plays basically your typical struggling, really messed up personality teenager where he wasn't hugged enough as a kid, and it's very unnerving on multiple levels. There's several things that he does in the movie that are weird, but what's one thing that's kind of specifically unnerving is that he like he's so messed up, but he has a much younger sister that's like maybe 5 or 6, and she's like perfectly normal. So it's almost as like his parents had him at like a younger age where they weren't really well equipped to raise someone, mostly mentally. But then they had his younger sister where they were in a better place in their lives to have a kid. And so he kind of suffers those consequences. And it's, like I said, it's more of an art house movie, but there are some horror elements to it.
Right.
So,
Well, it's psychological. I mean,
Yeah.
psychological thrillers are sometimes the best and can kind of go under the radar a little bit,
yeah,
but they're just as creepy and scary as anything else.
right.
But that's what it sounds like, is definitely more of that psychological thriller, which I'm a huge fan of too.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd probably dig it then.
Yeah.
And then we got like Requiem for a Dream,
Yes.
which, yeah, anyone who's seen this movie knows that it's not particularly horror, but it's a Darren Aronofsky movie where just crazy shit happens.
Yeah.
You really don't need to watch this movie more than once. It's just one and done.
Yeah.
It's almost like it should be required viewing for like middle school. Like screw the Dare program. Like just show them this movie and let them know that if you end up with a really bad cocaine or heroin habit, then you are either going to have to cut off your arm because it's infected, and the only possible way to survive is amputation.
Sure.
Or you're going to end up doing ass-to-ass porn with some other rando girl that you don't know in front of a bunch of old men like throwing money at you.
Sure. Yeah. Naturally.
Those are your only two options
Yeah.
when you do heroin.
Yeah. So say no to drugs.
Yeah,
Basically.
kids
Yeah.
say no to drugs. So yeah, there's that.
Yeah.
So do we miss anything? I know that we could talk for
Oh my gosh.
for so much longer, and we didn't even get to talk cover all the classics and all the great classics and great contemporary movies, and but yeah, I feel like we've covered quite a bit of material.
I think so. I think the main point is that we horror fans can be normal folks.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, that was we were kind of talking about that earlier. Is that I mean we don't want to generalize a group of people, but
Right.
yeah, like we're talking like who are the people that like watch this messed up shit, and like are they themselves unstable? But if you really take a good look at the people that watch a lot of horror movies or like really love the horror genre more than any other genre of movies, you realize that they tend to be very grounded individuals who just want to kind of maybe live vicariously through these very base primal reptilian instincts that all humans have. Like, what if I ran over that little kid with my car?
Right.
Like, you would never in a million years do that. But what would happen if that?
Yeah.
How would that feel if it happened? So
Right.
it's almost like this vicarious living through these characters. I feel like that kind of adds to why horror is so great. And I also you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like the adrenaline that you feel from watching a horror movie.
Yeah.
Like I once heard, I think it might have been from my psychology teacher back in high school. He was a pretty intelligent guy. He said, a good first date, if you're going to go see a movie, go see a horror movie, because, that girl will, or guy, will relate that feeling of adrenaline, and those endorphins being released in your body to hanging out with that person after going to see a horror movie.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, fear is so, it's like you said, primal and basic. It's like, it's just one of our
Basic
most
instinct.
absolute basic instinct. Exactly. And, you know, and so there's something just amazing about that feeling. And it wakes us up a little bit, because I think sometimes we can just be ho hum, and when I watch a good movie, I'm just like, bam, you know, it does something to me, you know, it's stimulating.
Yeah.
And I think too, like, I consider myself extremely well prepared for whatever, I mean, ghosts, right? You know, exorcisms, zombie apocalypse we talked about. I mean, I'm very prepared if something like that were to happen. I have
Excellent.
this like
'Cause I am not.
arsenal.
I am not
So come
prepared.
to my house.
In the TV show Walking Dead, I would be dead by like episode 2, maybe.
Oh no.
Yeah, but
that's,
whatever.
Yeah. And you know, we talk about it, my husband and I, and my dad actually. We talk about, if that zombie apocalypse comes, who are we gonna have to let go, and who's
Right.
gonna be there to rebuild and fight and that type of thing. And you know, we've always talked about the fact that my mom, we love her, but she wouldn't be able to come join us because she, you know, gets scared easily, and she's not, you know, a good fighter, and you know, she likes candy and things like that, which we would never have access to. And so it's that kind of stuff, and we think about it and we talk about it, and so I feel more like I'm more prepared for whatever life has to throw at me.
Well, maybe I'd be one of those like a Father Gabriel type of characters, where he's a pussy ass bitch in the beginning, like he's on top of a giant rock, like scared to death of all these zombies coming at him.
Right.
But then all of a sudden, 2 seasons later, he's just like mowing down
yeah.
humans with, you know, with a giant machine gun.
Yep. Look at that transformation.
I know.
Yeah. If you could make it that long, that'd be great. Some of the
I
characters.
hope to make it. I hope to, but if not, you know, I had a good run. You know, I had a little podcast.
Right.
You know, so awesome. Well, Shauna, thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been my honor. I mean, my pleasure. This is like I'm like
A dream
kid
come
in a
true
candy
for you.
store.
I know.
This has been a dream come true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
the only thing you've ever wanted in life.
Yes,
and
and now
I was
that's
able
done.
to move you that closer towards your destiny.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Well, like usual, you can find us on our website, geekgaragepodcast.com. There we have all our episodes. You can also find us on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. You can hit us up on Facebook. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I think we're going to take some sort of funny picture here in a second. But you'll probably see that picture before you hear this episode. So that's a little bit of redundant information. So that's cool. But yeah, thank you very much for tuning in. Shauna, thank you once again. And we will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.